Romans 12:15-16. Rejoice with those who rejoice, mourn with those who mourn, live in harmony with one another. This is kind of about empathy with those in the church, but it brings up an interesting problem. How can you rejoice with those who are rejoicing or mourn with those who are mourning if you don't know what the people in the church are going through? In the first century church, they met in homes, and it was a very informal atmosphere. And I'm sure that, you didn't have somebody getting in the front and talking. They may have been in the living room all sitting around, so to speak, and, one person was maybe talking, but it was a very informal atmosphere, and everybody knew everybody else. We've lost that. Obviously, you can't have that in a megachurch with 4,000 members. But our problem is, somewhere along the line, we've structured our churches where everybody faces forward. You come in, you're quiet, you don't talk in the church service. You sit down, you face forward. The minister gets up and he gives a 30-minute sermon, and then everybody files out. So there's no interaction among the people. Now, I think a lot of churches have kind of tried to mitigate that by having an area after the service where people can go out there and they can have coffee and donuts and talk. The problem is, two problems. One is they normally talk to their friends, and it's hard for new people to break into that. And the other thing is that the conversation tends to be very trivial, very light. You don't really get into what the people are going through in their lives. So we have a real problem, in the fact that I think the people that go to our services tend to be anonymous. They come in, they sit quietly in the service, and then they leave. Maybe they say hi to somebody, but nobody really knows what's going on in their lives. And so our churches are all in violation of this. And this is a really important thing. People need to feel important. And we're just not doing that. In our church service at my church this last Sunday, something interesting kind of happened. After the service, somehow we got a discussion of our religious backgrounds, and everybody was talking about, everybody that had been Pentecostal were talking about what happened to them growing up Pentecostal. And I could see that there was a real connections forming. People were bonding. Somehow we need to get that back in our churches. I think as a suggestion, we need, after church, a time where it's kind of organized, where you ask maybe a question to get the conversation started. And the question would have to be something that is non-threatening, because people feel intimidated speaking up anyway. And it would have to be something that everybody can relate to. Like this question, the people that grew up Pentecostal. Non-threatening, something they can talk about, they can contribute. So those kind of questions can spark debate and conversation that can get the people to open up to each other and relate. We have to get people where they can know each other and know what's going on in their lives. I think this is just vital if if Christianity is going to survive in the United States. And maybe what I suggested is not the way to do it, but it's something that we need to do. And currently, I think this is more important than the minister being up there for 30 minutes saying, be good or be nice, don't lie, whatever. I think this is a vital thing if Christianity is going to survive in the United States in the next 100 years. Yeah, I'm sorry if I rattled on about that, but this issue is just so important, particularly if Christianity is going to survive in the next century in the United States. We have to understand that what's important is people. The focus has to be on people. It was in the first century, and it has to be on the 21st century. We structure our church like we did 150 years ago when people were socially required to go to church. And we need to change. 150 years ago, they didn't believe in putting cushions on the pews so you would stay awake. They had kneeling things where you would kneel to pray, which were uncomfortable. It wasn't designed to be comfortable. It was designed for people that felt an obligation to go to church. And that is no longer true. The structure we have where you go to church, you sit down facing forward, the pastor gets up there and lectures you for 30 minutes like you were in a classroom, isn't working anymore. It needs to be rethought. We need to get back to the first century where they realized what was important were people. We need to get back to where people feel comfortable talking about what's going on in their lives, whatever issues they're facing. And we just aren't doing that. Even now when we ask people for prayer requests, typically they're going to ask prayer for other people. They're not going to ask for things that are really impacting their lives that they're concerned about. At least not normally. Next week, I'm going to skip the rest of the section on what is genuine love, because he's repeating what he's already talked about. He talks about the importance of not getting stuck up, of poor people should be treated just like the rich people, and not like James says, where the rich person comes into the church and you go, hey, let's sit on the front pew. And the poor person comes in like, well, why don't you go sit over there in the corner someplace? Kind of reminds me of something that happened to a church that we went to when we first came to St. Petersburg. We went to a Bible study on Wednesday, and the greeter and I were talking, and the greeter said that the current pastor gave him instructions that if somebody came to the church and they looked like they were homeless, or they weren't, their clothes weren't up to par, but particularly if they were homeless, that they were to be denied entry. They would be turned away. And I thought, dang, we still have the issue from the first century that James was struggling for us to deal with. People don't change. What they struggle with in first century, we struggle with now. The other issue is a really hard issue where Paul is saying, when people dislike you and people mistreat you, that you still have to go out of your way to be nice to them. And if they need help, you help them. Not something that comes naturally to us.